If you step foot in this house again, I swear to God I'll call the police and tell them you assaulted me. Kaya's voice bounced off the walls of my living room, shrill and venomous. Her perfectly manicured finger jabbed toward my face, close enough that I could smell her overpriced perfume mixing with the rage radiating from her pores. Her eyes were wild, mascara slightly smudged at the corners from whatever fake tears she'd manufactured earlier. Behind her, my son Griffin stood frozen, his face drained of all color, looking like a man who'd just realized he was standing at the edge of a cliff. I didn't flinch, didn't step back, didn't give her the satisfaction of seeing me rattled by her theatrics. Instead, I crossed my arms slowly, deliberately, and let the silence stretch between us for 3 long seconds. It was enough time to watch her confidence waver, just slightly, as she registered that her threat hadn't landed the way she'd planned. "You're screaming like this," I said, keeping my voice steady and low, "because you have absolutely no idea what I discovered." The change in her face was instantaneous. The fury drained away, replaced by something I recognized immediately: pure, undiluted fear. Her hand dropped to her side. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again like a fish gasping for air. The performance was over. The real Kaya was showing through the cracks. Griffin's voice came out hoarse, broken. "Discovered what, Mom?" My son, my beautiful, brilliant boy who I'd watched transform from a confident young architect into this hollow shell of a man over the past 2 years. He'd lost at least 15 pounds. The circles under his eyes had become permanent fixtures. His hands were trembling slightly as he stood there in my foyer, probably terrified of what was about to happen, but too exhausted to run from it anymore. I pulled my phone from the pocket of my ivory cashmere cardigan. The device felt heavy in my hand, weighted with the truth it contained. For 3 weeks, I'd been carrying these screenshots around like grenades, waiting for the right moment to pull the pin. This moment, with Kaya threatening to destroy my reputation with a false police report, was exactly right. "Mom, what's going on?" Griffin's voice cracked on the last word. Kaya's eyes were locked on my phone. "Whatever she's about to show you is fake, baby. She probably hired someone to hack my accounts or create fake messages. This is exactly the kind of controlling, manipulative behavior I've been trying to protect you from." I almost laughed. Almost. But the situation was too heartbreaking for laughter. Instead, I opened the folder labeled KM Evidence and held the screen where both of them could see it. "Let me read you something," I said. "This is from a text conversation between Kaya and someone named Devin Ashworth. Dated October 15th, approximately 5 months ago. Kaya writes, 'He's my temporary plan B until I land the Lancome contract. Once my personal brand is established or Devin proposes, I'm out of this middle-class gold cage.'" The silence that followed was deafening. I could hear the antique clock in the hallway ticking, marking each second of my son's world falling apart. Who the hell is Devin Ashworth? Griffin's voice was barely a whisper. Kaya lunged for my phone. "Give me that! You have no right!" I stepped back smoothly, holding the device out of reach. "Devin Ashworth is a 44-year-old investment portfolio manager worth approximately $40 million. Your wife has been sleeping with him for the past 5 months. They've taken 3 trips together: Aruba, Miami, and Santa Barbara. The Aruba trip, if you recall, was when she told you she was at a women's wellness retreat." Griffin's legs seemed to give out. He sank onto the bottom step of my staircase, his face now beyond pale, almost gray. No, you're making this up. You've always hated her. You've always tried to—" "Griffin." I kept my voice gentle but firm. "I'm forwarding these screenshots to your email right now. You can verify the metadata yourself. You can call Devin Ashworth yourself. His number is in here too. But before you convince yourself I'm lying, let me read you one more message. This one is to her best friend Lexi, dated 3 weeks ago." I scrolled to the conversation that had kept me awake for 3 straight nights. Kaya writes, "The manipulation is so easy it's almost boring. I cry about my anxiety and he hands over the credit card without a single question. Yesterday was $6,000 at Gucci. Told him it was therapist-prescribed retail therapy. And the best part? I've got his witch of a mother completely blocked out now. She tried calling him 4 times last week, and he didn't even notice because I deleted the call logs." My voice cracked on that last sentence. 4 times. I'd called my son 4 times in 1 week, desperate to hear his voice, to know he was okay. And she'd erased me like I was nothing. Griffin was staring at his wife with an expression I'd never seen on his face before. A mixture of horror, betrayal, and something that looked like he was seeing a complete stranger. Kaya! She was backing toward the door now, her calculated composure completely shattered. Baby. She's twisting everything. Those messages are out of context. They're just me venting to friends. Everyone vents. It doesn't mean... Out of context? I held up the phone again. There are 47 pages of evidence here. Screenshots of hotel reservations, credit card statements showing charges you claimed were for business lunches that were actually $500 dinners with Devin. Bank transfers where you moved $47,000 from your joint account with Griffin into a personal account that only has your name on it. An account Griffin didn't even know existed. That last detail hit my son like a physical blow. 47,000? I was going to tell you about that, Kaya said quickly, her voice rising into a register I'd come to recognize as her panic mode. It's an investment opportunity, a business venture. I was going to surprise you when... The investment opportunity, I interrupted, is for a lifestyle brand that Kaya was planning to launch after divorcing Griffin. According to her business plan, which is also in these messages, she intended to file for divorce within the next 6 months, claim that Griffin was emotionally abusive, and use her survival story as marketing material for her brand. There's literally a document titled Post-Griffin Brand Strategy. Griffin made a sound that wasn't quite a word. His hands were gripping the edge of the steps so hard his knuckles had gone white. Kaya's mask was completely gone now. The sweet, anxious, vulnerable woman she'd pretended to be for 2 years had vanished, replaced by someone cold and calculating. You had no right to invade my privacy. What you did is illegal. I'll sue you for... Actually, I said, keeping my tone almost conversational. Everything I have was obtained legally through a licensed private investigator who specializes in corporate and personal fraud cases. Marcus Brennan. You might remember him. He's the one who helped me identify the embezzlement at my firm 3 years ago. Very thorough, very expensive, very worth every penny. I turned my attention back to Griffin, whose whole body was shaking now. Sweetheart, I know this is devastating. I know you want to believe she's telling the truth, but I need you to understand something. I didn't want to be right about this. I would have given anything to be wrong. But a month ago, when you showed up at my house at 11 o'clock at night, unable to sleep, trying to tell me something was wrong, but the words wouldn't come. Do you remember that night? He nodded slowly, tears starting to track down his face. That night, before you could tell me what was troubling you, Kaya called claiming she was having an anxiety attack. You left immediately. The next morning, you sent me a text message saying I'd tried to plant doubts about your marriage, and we needed space. Do you remember sending that text? Griffin's face twisted with confusion. I don't... You didn't send it, I said gently. Kaya sent it from your phone. She admitted as much in a message to Lexi, laughing about how easy it was to isolate you from me. She wrote, sent a breakup text to his mom from his phone while he was in the shower. He doesn't even know she's been blocked from his life. This is almost too easy. Oh my God! Griffin's voice was breaking. Oh my God, Mom! All this time I thought you'd stopped trying to reach me. I thought you'd given up on me. The pain in his voice shattered something inside me. For 3 weeks, I'd been operating in pure protective mode, gathering evidence, building a case, preparing for this confrontation. But now, seeing my son's face as he realized the depth of the betrayal, feeling the weight of all those deleted calls and unanswered messages, the grief hit me like a tidal wave. I would never give up on you, I managed to say. Never. Kaya was at the door now, her hand on the knob. This is insane. You're both insane. Griffin, if you believe any of this psychotic conspiracy theory over your own wife, then stop. Griffin stood up slowly, wiping his face with the back of his hand. Just stop talking. The way he said it, so tired, so utterly defeated, seemed to finally penetrate Kaya's desperation. She stood there, frozen, as my son walked past her to stand beside me. Send me everything, he said quietly. Every screenshot, every document, every piece of evidence. I want to see all of it. I nodded, my fingers already moving across the screen, forwarding the massive file to his email address. Kaya's face cycled through several emotions in rapid succession. Shock, rage, fear, and finally, a kind of cold calculation that made my skin crawl. Fine, fine. You want to see evidence? I have evidence too. Evidence of how you've controlled him his entire life. How you've never thought anyone was good enough for your precious son. How you've manipulated and interfered and— I have recordings, I said simply, of you talking to Devin about how you plan to claim domestic abuse, about how you research divorce attorneys who specialize in helping women escape controlling husbands, about how you practiced crying on command to make your story more believable. Would you like me to play those for Griffin too? The color drained from her face for a second time. You're bluffing. I pressed play on an audio file. Kaya's voice, crystal clear, filled my living room. The trick is to document everything as if you're the victim. Photos of yourself crying, journal entries about feeling trapped, even a few visits to a therapist where you hint at emotional abuse without saying it outright. Then when you file, you have a whole narrative ready. My lawyer says I could easily get half of everything, plus ongoing support, especially if— I stopped the recording. Griffin looked like he might be sick. Get out, he said to Kaya. His voice was steady now, hardened by something I'd never heard before. Get out of this house. Baby, please, just listen. Get out! The force of his shout surprised all of us. Kaya stumbled backward, her eyes wide. For a moment, she looked like she might try one more manipulation, one more performance. But something in Griffin's face must have told her it was over. The show was done. The audience had left. She yanked open the door. You'll regret this. Both of you. I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of people you really are. I have 340,000 followers who will believe every word I— 340,000 followers, I said calmly, who are about to learn that your perfect marriage was a scam, your luxury lifestyle was funded by money stolen from your husband, and your anxiety journey was a manipulation tactic. Marcus has already prepared a very thorough timeline with receipts. I really wouldn't recommend going public with this if I were you. She stared at me with pure hatred. You think you've won. You think you've saved your precious son. But he'll never forgive you for destroying his marriage. He'll spend the rest of his life resenting you for this. I looked at Griffin, who had moved to stand between us, creating a physical barrier between his wife and his mother. His jaw was set, tears still wet on his face, but his eyes were clear. That's a risk I'm willing to take, I said, because I'd rather have my son hate me for telling the truth than watch him destroy himself believing a lie. Kaya left without another word, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. The sound echoed through the house, and then there was silence. Just me and Griffin, standing in the foyer where I'd raised him, where he'd taken his first steps, where I'd photographed him before his high school prom, where I'd hugged him goodbye the day he moved into his first apartment. He stood there for a long moment, staring at the closed door. Then his legs gave out completely. I caught him as he collapsed, and we sank to the floor together, my son sobbing in my arms like he hadn't done since he was a child. I'm so sorry, he kept saying. Mom, I'm so sorry. How could I not see it? How could I be so stupid? You're not stupid, I whispered, holding him tight. You're not stupid. You loved someone and she took advantage of that. That's on her, not you. We stayed there on the floor of my foyer for 20 minutes, maybe longer. I held my son while he cried, stroked his hair like I'd done when he was little, and felt something inside me finally unclench. For 3 weeks I'd been holding my breath, terrified that this confrontation would push him further away, that he'd choose her over the truth. But he hadn't. He'd chosen to see what was real, even though it was destroying him. Finally, he pulled back, wiping his face. The deleted messages, the ones you mentioned, how did you even get those? Marcus has a digital forensics specialist on his team. When Kaya upgraded her phone last month, she didn't completely wipe the old one before trading it in. The Apple Store kept it for standard data recovery protocol. Marcus acquired it through legal channels. Everything that she thought was deleted forever was still there, backed up in the cloud she'd forgotten to disconnect. Griffin let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. She always said she was so careful about technology. Arrogance makes people careless, I said. She was so convinced she was smarter than everyone else that she got sloppy. He nodded slowly, then looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. I haven't been to this house in 3 weeks. She always had a reason why we couldn't visit. Always had some crisis or commitment or emergency. And I just believed her. Every single time. She's very good at what she does, I said gently. Professional manipulators are. That's why they're dangerous. He pulled out his phone with shaking hands. I need to see everything, all of it. I need to know exactly how blind I've been. I helped him to his feet, then led him to my home office. We spent the next 2 hours going through every document, every screenshot, every piece of evidence that Marcus had compiled. I watched my son's face as he read messages where his wife called him useful, gullible, and her best investment. I watched him discover that the Tulum trip she'd posted about as their second honeymoon had actually included Devin, who'd been staying in the villa next door. I watched him find the spreadsheet where she'd calculated exactly how much she could extract from him in a divorce. By the time we finished, it was dark outside. Griffin sat back in the leather chair, staring at nothing. I need to go back to the apartment, he finally said. I need to pack my things before she gets there. Stay here tonight, I said. Please. We can get your things tomorrow with Marcus present as a witness. Right now, you need rest. He nodded numbly. Okay. Yeah. I don't think I can face that apartment tonight anyway. I made him tea. Chamomile with honey. The same thing I'd made him when he was sick as a child. He held the cup but didn't drink, just stared into it like it might hold answers. How long have you known? He asked quietly. About all of this? I've suspected since the beginning, I admitted. But concrete evidence? About 3 weeks, since the night you came to see me. 3 weeks, he repeated. You've been carrying this around for 3 weeks, knowing what she was doing to me, and you didn't. I needed ironclad proof, I said. If I'd come to you with suspicions, she would have turned it around, made me look like the paranoid mother who couldn't let go. You would have defended her, and I would have lost you completely. I needed evidence so overwhelming that even someone as skilled at manipulation as Kaya couldn't explain it away. He nodded slowly. You were right to wait. If you'd told me even a week ago without proof, I would have probably cut you off completely. She'd been working on that for months, getting me to see every concern you raised as an attack, every question as interference. That's what they do, I said. They isolate you from everyone who might see through them. Family, friends, anyone who really knows you becomes the enemy. Griffin set down the untouched tea. I thought I was going crazy, Mom. These past few months, I'd noticed things. Money missing, her phone always turned away, how she'd get angry if I made plans without checking with her first. But then she'd cry and apologize and explain, and I'd feel guilty for even questioning her, like I was the bad guy for not trusting my own wife. That's called gaslighting, I said gently, and she's very, very good at it. He looked up at me with eyes full of pain. I almost lost you over her. I almost chose her lies over my own mother. What does that say about me? It says you're human, I replied. It says you loved someone and wanted to believe the best in them. There's no shame in that, Griffin. The shame is hers, not yours. We sat in silence for a while. The clock on the wall ticked steadily, marking time in a world that had just been turned completely upside down. Outside, I could hear the distant sound of traffic, of life continuing normally for everyone else while my son's entire reality had just shattered. What happens now? He finally asked. Now, I said, you heal. You file for divorce. You protect your assets. And you learn from this. And she just gets away with it? I smiled grimly. Oh no, she doesn't get away with anything. The prenuptial agreement she insisted on, the one she thought protected her future earnings, actually has very clear clauses about fraud and infidelity. She'll be leaving this marriage with nothing but the clothes she bought with your money. And as for her social media career, I pulled up something on my phone. Marcus has already prepared a very detailed timeline of her activities. If she tries to spin this publicly, we have everything ready to share with her sponsors, her followers, and anyone else who might be interested in the real story. Griffin stared at me. You've thought of everything. I've had 3 weeks to plan, I said simply. And nobody threatens my son's well-being without facing consequences. For the first time since Kaya's screaming match in my foyer, Griffin smiled. It was small, sad, and exhausted, but it was real. "Thank you, Mom," he whispered, "for not giving up on me. Even when I gave up on you." I reached over and took his hand. "Never. I will never give up on you. That's not what mothers do." 3 years ago, I lost my husband Robert to a heart attack at the age of 62. We'd been married for 28 years, built a life together from scratch, turned a modest marketing consultancy into a multi-million-dollar business that we eventually sold for enough money to secure our future and Griffin's. Robert was my partner in every sense of the word, in business, in parenting, in life. When he died suddenly on a Tuesday morning, collapsing in our kitchen while making coffee, a part of me died with him. Griffin took it hard, harder than I did in some ways. He'd worshipped his father. Robert had been the steady, calm presence in our son's life, the one who taught him to throw a baseball, helped him with math homework, talked him through his first heartbreak. When Griffin was 12 and terrified he wasn't good enough for the advanced placement program, Robert had sat with him every night for a month, building his confidence back up piece by piece. They were incredibly close. After the funeral, Griffin threw himself into work. He was 29, newly promoted to associate at one of Boston's most prestigious architectural firms, and he used his career as an escape from grief. I understood. I was doing the same thing. I'd taken the money from selling our business and started my own boutique consultancy, Lockhart Brand Solutions, working with luxury companies on rebranding strategies. It kept me busy, kept me from sitting in an empty house thinking about all the conversations Robert and I would never have. For 8 months, Griffin and I navigated our grief separately but together. We had dinner every Sunday. He'd come to the house in Belmont, the same house where he'd grown up, and we'd cook something Robert used to love. We'd talk about work, about memories, about nothing in particular. Those dinners were my lifeline. My son was all I had left, and watching him slowly come back to himself, seeing the color return to his face and the spark return to his eyes, gave me hope that we'd both survive this. Then, he met Kaya. It was at a networking event for young professionals in November, 8 months after Robert's death. Griffin mentioned her casually at first. "I met this interesting woman. She works in event promotion." Then more frequently, "Kaya suggested this great restaurant." Then constantly, "Kaya thinks, Kaya says, Kaya wants." By December, he was bringing her to Sunday dinners. I wanted to like her. God, I wanted to like her. Griffin seemed happy for the first time since his father died, and I was desperate for him to feel joy again. But from that very first dinner, something felt wrong. She was beautiful. I'd give her that. 27 years old, dark hair with caramel highlights, dressed in clothes that were clearly expensive, but not quite fitting for a casual family dinner. She'd shown up in a designer dress and heels that cost more than most people's monthly rent. When I'd asked about her work, her answers were vague. Brand partnerships, influencer marketing, building my platform. She had 300,000 Instagram followers, which she mentioned within the first 10 minutes, and her phone was never more than inches from her hand. But it wasn't the superficiality that bothered me. It was the small things, the way she'd cut Griffin off mid-sentence to correct a detail that didn't matter. The way she'd asked about the value of our house in Belmont with a casualness that felt calculated. The way she'd taken photos of everything, the dining room, the artwork, even the antique china, posting them to her Instagram with captions about family dinners in historic homes. She'd turned our private grief recovery ritual into content. When Griffin walked her to her car that night, I'd stood at the kitchen window watching them. She'd kissed him, then immediately pulled out her phone to check something. Even in that intimate moment, she couldn't disconnect from her digital life. "What do you think of her?" Griffin had asked when he came back inside, his face eager and hopeful. I'd chosen my words carefully. "She seems very focused on her career." "She is," he'd said proudly. "She's built her whole platform from nothing. She's really ambitious." "How did you two meet exactly?" "At that networking event I mentioned. She was working it, getting contact information for potential brand partnerships. We started talking about architecture and social media marketing, and she was so interested in my work. She asked really insightful questions about how buildings create emotional responses, how spaces can be photographed to tell stories. It was refreshing to meet someone who saw the creative side of what I do. Of course, she'd asked insightful questions. She'd researched him. I'd seen her Instagram. She'd posted about the event, tagged the attendee list, highlighted the eligible bachelors in Boston's professional scene. My son, a grieving young architect from a wealthy family, must have looked like a golden opportunity. But I didn't say that. Instead, I'd smiled and said, "She certainly seems taken with you." Over the next few months, their relationship accelerated at a pace that made me uncomfortable. By February, she'd moved into his apartment in Back Bay. By March, he was talking about marriage. When I gently suggested they might want to wait a bit longer, get to know each other better, Griffin had gotten defensive. "Dad would have wanted me to be happy," he'd said. And that argument ended the conversation. How could I push back against what Robert would have wanted? He wasn't here to speak for himself. They got engaged in April, 6 months after meeting. Griffin had taken her to the same restaurant where Robert had proposed to me. Robert's favorite place, a small Italian restaurant in the North End. When Griffin told me, showing me the ring he'd bought, I'd felt a twist in my stomach that I couldn't quite name. It felt wrong that she was wearing a ring he'd chosen at the jeweler where Robert had bought mine. It felt like she was inserting herself into our family history, rewriting it with herself at the center. The wedding planning was a nightmare. Kaya wanted everything: designer dress, celebrity photographer, venue that cost more than most people's cars. She'd created a Pinterest board with a budget of $150,000. When I'd offered to contribute $30,000, a generous amount by any reasonable standard, she'd barely hidden her disappointment. "Most mothers of the groom cover at least half," she'd said sweetly, showing me articles about traditional wedding cost breakdowns that she'd clearly searched for specifically. "Most grooms aren't paying for their own weddings," I'd replied calmly. "Griffin is a grown man with his own income. Robert and I always raised him to be financially independent." She'd smiled, but her eyes had gone cold. "Of course. I just thought since you'd sold your business for so much, you might want to invest in your only son's happiness." The manipulation was so obvious it was almost insulting. But Griffin had been there, looking uncomfortable, clearly caught between his mother and his fiancée. So I'd simply said, "$30,000 is my contribution. How you and Griffin choose to budget the rest is between you two." They'd ended up spending $85,000. I found out later, much later, that Griffin had depleted his savings and taken out a personal loan to cover the difference. He'd never mentioned it, never asked for help. Kaya had convinced him that asking his mother for more money would be embarrassing and prove that we can't make it on our own. The wedding itself was beautiful in a sterile, Instagram-perfect way. Every moment was choreographed for social media. Kaya had hired a content creator to film everything for her wedding series that she posted over 3 months. She'd even insisted on a first-look photo shoot that took 90 minutes, making 200 guests wait in the August heat while she got the perfect shots. I'd watched my son marry a woman I didn't trust, knowing there was nothing I could do to stop it. Robert's absence was a physical ache that day. He would have known what to say. He would have found a way to reach Griffin that I couldn't. After the wedding, the distance started immediately. Sunday dinners became monthly, then every other month, then, "We'll let you know when we're free." Phone calls went to voicemail. Text messages got one-word responses. When I'd call Griffin at work, his assistant would say he was in meetings. When I'd stop by his apartment unannounced, Kaya would answer the door with a tight smile and explain that Griffin was exhausted, or not feeling well, or really needs his downtime. I watched my son disappear behind a wall built by his wife, brick by brick, and I was powerless to stop it. The first real warning sign came about 6 months into their marriage. Michael Torres, my accountant, who'd been handling the Lockhart family finances for 15 years, called me on a Wednesday afternoon. "Daphne, I need to talk to you about Griffin's trust fund." My stomach dropped. "What about it?" "He's requesting early access to a portion of it, $120,000. The fund isn't supposed to be accessible until he turns 35. That's another 3 years. He can request early access, but it requires your co-signature as the fund administrator." Did he say why he needs it? "Investment opportunities." That's all he'd tell me. "But Daphne, I've managed money for wealthy families for 25 years. When a young man suddenly needs a six-figure sum from his trust fund less than a year into marriage, it's rarely for a good reason. I'd called Griffin immediately. The conversation had been tense and brief. He'd been evasive about the specifics, mentioning business ventures and strategic investments in a tone that sounded rehearsed. In the background, I'd heard Kaya's voice. "Baby, you don't have to explain your financial decisions to anyone. We're adults." "Griffin, I'm not trying to control you," I'd said carefully. "I'm trying to understand. This is your inheritance from your father. He wanted you to have financial security. Dad would want me to build my own life," Griffin had replied, and I could hear the script Kaya had written in every word. "He'd want me to be independent and make my own choices." "Of course. But this is a significant amount of money. Mom, I really don't need a lecture right now. Are you going to co-sign or not?" The ultimatum in his voice had hurt more than anything. "I need to think about it." "Fine. I'll call you when you're ready to support your son instead of interrogating him." He'd hung up. I'd sat in my office for an hour, staring at my phone, Robert's photograph on my desk looking back at me. What would he have done? Would he have signed? Would he have refused? Would he have found some third option that I couldn't see? In the end, I'd signed. I told myself it was his money, his choice, but I'd asked Michael to flag any unusual activity on Griffin's accounts, a decision that would prove crucial months later. That was when I'd started truly paying attention. I'd created a private Instagram account and followed Kaya's public page. I'd watched her document their life, expensive dinners, designer shopping trips, luxury weekends. Every post was tagged with brands, clearly hoping for sponsorships. She'd created a persona as the architectural wife, positioning herself as Griffin's partner in his creative journey. But anyone who actually knew architecture could see how shallow her knowledge was. She'd repost his firm's projects with captions full of buzzwords that meant nothing. Her follower count grew steadily. Brands started sending her free products. She'd post unboxing videos, haul posts, day-in-the-life content that painted her marriage as perfect. Meanwhile, Griffin appeared less and less in her posts. When he did appear, he looked tired. The spark that had always made my son who he was, his quick laugh, his passionate discussions about design, his genuine warmth, seemed dimmed. I'd wanted to intervene so many times. Every instinct I had as a mother screamed that something was wrong. But every time I'd tried to reach out, Kaya had been there, intercepting. When I'd invited Griffin to lunch, she'd joined without asking. When I'd suggested mother-son time, she'd get upset about being excluded from the family. When I'd asked Griffin direct questions about his happiness, she'd answer for him. And then came the night 3 weeks ago that changed everything. Griffin had shown up at my house at 11 p.m. without calling first. He'd looked terrible, pale, thinner than I'd ever seen him, dark circles under his eyes like bruises. He'd stood in my doorway, opening and closing his mouth, clearly trying to say something, but unable to get the words out. "Sweetheart, what's wrong?" I'd asked, pulling him inside. "Mom, I need to ask you something. Do you think I made the right choice?" My heart had broken at the question. "About what? About everything? About Kaya? About—" He'd trailed off, tears forming in his eyes. "I can't shake this feeling that something's wrong, but every time I try to figure out what it is, I feel crazy. She says I'm stressed from work, that I'm projecting, that I need to trust her more. And maybe she's right. Maybe I am just paranoid and—" His phone had rung. Kaya. He'd answered, and I'd heard her voice even from across the room, high-pitched and panicked. "Griffin, where are you? You just left without saying anything." "I'm having a panic attack. I need you here. Please come home. I can't breathe. Please." And he'd gone. Of course he'd gone. He'd apologized to me, promised we'd talk later, and rushed out into the night to save his wife from her manufactured crisis. The next morning, I'd received a text from his number. "Mom, I think it's best if we take some space. You tried to plant doubts about my marriage last night, and that's not okay. Kaya and I need to focus on our relationship without outside interference." I'd read that message 50 times, analyzing every word. It didn't sound like Griffin. The phrasing was wrong, the tone was wrong. But what could I do? Show up at his apartment and accuse his wife of sending fake texts? That would only push him further away. That was when I'd called Marcus Brennan. That was when I'd stopped hoping things would get better on their own and started gathering evidence. That was when I'd shifted from worried mother to strategic protector. And now, after 3 weeks of investigation, after 47 pages of evidence, after countless sleepless nights wondering if I was doing the right thing, now Griffin was asleep in his childhood bedroom upstairs, his marriage destroyed, but his eyes finally open. Tomorrow, we'd start the process of untangling him from Kaya's web. Tonight, I'd sit in Robert's study, looking at his photograph, and hope that wherever he was, he understood why I'd had to do this, why I'd had to be the one to shatter our son's world, to save him from drowning in someone else's lies. Griffin slept for 14 hours straight. I checked on him twice during the night, standing in the doorway of his old bedroom, watching the rise and fall of his chest like I used to when he was a baby. He looked younger in sleep. The tension that had become permanent in his features finally relaxed. But even unconscious, I could see the toll the past 2 years had taken. The weight loss, the premature lines around his eyes, the exhaustion etched into every part of him. When he finally came downstairs the next morning, it was almost noon. I'd made coffee and set out breakfast, though I wasn't sure he'd eat. He stood in the kitchen doorway for a moment, looking disoriented, like he'd forgotten where he was. "I thought maybe it was a nightmare," he said quietly. Then I woke up and saw my old bedroom and remembered it was all real. I poured him coffee, black with 1 sugar, the way he'd taken it since college. "How are you feeling?" "Empty," he said, taking the mug. "Like someone reached inside me and scooped everything out. Is that normal?" "I think so. When your world gets turned upside down like this, empty is probably better than the alternative. The pain comes later." He sat at the kitchen table, the same table where he'd done homework as a child, where we'd had family dinners for decades. "I need to go to the apartment today. Get my things. I can't stay there anymore. I'll come with you. And I think we should bring Marcus, just as a witness. If Kaya's there, I don't want any accusations flying around about what was or wasn't said." Griffin nodded slowly. "She's probably already changing the narrative, probably posting on Instagram about how she's the victim of a toxic family situation." I pulled out my phone and checked. Sure enough, Kaya's Instagram story from 3 hours ago showed a photo of her hands wrapped around a coffee mug, face carefully cropped out, caption reading, "When family becomes toxic and you have to choose your peace over their control. Boundaries matter. Your mental health matters. Sometimes the people who are supposed to love you hurt you the most." Griffin looked at it and laughed, a hollow, bitter sound. Of course she's already playing the victim. 340,000 people are reading that right now, thinking I'm some abusive husband with a controlling mother. "Let her post," I said. "We have documentation. If she wants to take this public, we're prepared. Marcus has everything ready to go. Timeline, receipts, screenshots. One false move from her and the truth goes to every sponsor, every brand partnership, every follower. She knows that. Does she? Because she doesn't seem like someone who thinks about consequences. She thinks about them when they affect her income," I said. "Trust me, the threat of losing her influencer career is the only leverage that will keep her quiet." We called Marcus, who agreed to meet us at Griffin's apartment at 2 p.m. In the meantime, Griffin went through his emails on my laptop, reading through everything I'd sent him the night before. I made him eat something, toast and eggs, basic food that he pushed around his plate but eventually consumed, and tried not to hover even though every instinct told me to wrap my son in bubble wrap and never let the world hurt him again. At 1:30, we drove to Back Bay. The apartment Griffin shared with Kaya was in a luxury building with a doorman and high-rise views, 3,000 square feet that cost him $4,500 a month in rent alone. I'd only been there a handful of times, always with Kaya present, always feeling like an intruder in my own son's space. Marcus was waiting in the lobby when we arrived. He was in his late 40s, gray-haired and professional, dressed in a suit that made him look more like a lawyer than a private investigator. He shook Griffin's hand firmly. "I'm sorry we're meeting under these circumstances," Marcus said, "but I want you to know that everything I found was obtained legally and ethically. If this goes to court, it will all hold up." "Thank you," Griffin said, though his voice sounded mechanical. "I appreciate that." We rode the elevator to the 14th floor in silence. When Griffin unlocked the apartment door, I braced myself for what we might find. But the space was empty and eerily quiet. No sign of Kaya anywhere. "She's probably at her friend Lexi's place," Griffin said, looking around. "That's where she goes when she needs to decompress, which I now realize means when she needs to strategize her next move." The apartment was exactly as I remembered. Modern, pristine, decorated in shades of white and gray, with carefully curated accent pieces that looked expensive but felt cold. Every surface was clear, every item placed for maximum aesthetic impact. It looked like a showroom, not a home. Kaya had even installed ring lights in 3 different rooms for optimal content creation. Griffin stood in the middle of the living room, looking lost. "I don't even know where to start." "Start with essentials," I said gently. "Clothes, toiletries, important documents. We can come back for furniture and other items later once the legal separation is established." He nodded and headed toward the bedroom. I stayed in the living room with Marcus, who was already documenting the condition of the apartment with his phone camera, a precaution in case Kaya later claimed anything was damaged or stolen. "How's he holding up?" Marcus asked quietly. "As well as can be expected. He's in shock. The anger will come later. It always does. I've seen this pattern dozens of times. Someone realizes they've been manipulated, and there's this initial numbness. Then the fury hits. He's going to need support when that happens." I nodded, watching the doorway where Griffin had disappeared. From the bedroom, I could hear drawers opening and closing, the sound of my son methodically packing up pieces of a life that had turned out to be a lie. While Griffin packed, I found myself drawn to the home office, a small room that Kaya had claimed as her content creation studio. It was filled with photography equipment, a desk covered in makeup and skincare products waiting to be reviewed, and a bulletin board covered in what she called her brand strategy. I'd never been allowed in this room before. "My creative space," she'd always said when I'd glanced through the doorway. "I need to keep it private for client confidentiality." What clients? I'd wondered at the time. She was an influencer, not a lawyer. Now I understood. The bulletin board told the whole story. There were printed screenshots of wealthy men's LinkedIn profiles, not just Devin Ashworth, but others. Investment bankers, tech entrepreneurs, real estate developers. Each profile had handwritten notes. Net worth est 15M. Recently divorced. Attends charity galas. She'd been researching backup plans, potential upgrades from Griffin. There were also printed analytics from her Instagram account showing engagement rates and follower growth, with notes like, "Need 500K followers for Sephora partnership, target date March, and luxury brand deals require 1M plus following. Griffin's connections could accelerate timeline." Most disturbing was a handwritten journal entry taped to the board, dated 6 months into her marriage. "G is useful but limited. Architect salary caps at 200K even with partnership. Devin's portfolio is 40M plus. Need to keep G invested while building D relationship. Timeline. Secure D's commitment by spring, file divorce by summer, launch brand as Survivor by fall. Story angle. Escaped controlling family, found my voice, built empire from ashes." I took photos of everything with my phone. This wasn't just evidence of infidelity. This was premeditated fraud, documented in her own handwriting. "Mom?" Griffin's voice came from behind me. I turned to see him standing in the doorway, holding a half-packed suitcase. His eyes went to the bulletin board. "What is that?" I stepped aside so he could see. Watched his face as he read the notes, the calculations, the cold strategic planning of his entire marriage. His skin went from pale to gray. "She was shopping for my replacement," he said flatly. "While we were married, she was literally shopping for someone richer." "I'm sorry, sweetheart. I'm so sorry you have to see this." He moved closer to the board, reading every detail. "March 15th, 2 years ago. That's when we met." She wrote, "Target acquired. Griffin Lockhart, 30, architect, family worth 4.5 est. Target acquired." That's what I was, a target. Marcus had joined us, documenting everything with his camera. "This is actually helpful for the divorce proceedings," he said pragmatically. "Proof of fraudulent intent from the beginning. Any halfway decent lawyer can use this to invalidate claims she might make." Griffin pulled the journal entry off the board, staring at it. "She calls me G. Not even my full name. Just a letter. Just a placeholder until she found someone better. Griffin, I started, but he was already moving, pulling more papers from the desk drawers. He found folders labeled by month, each containing printed Instagram analytics, sponsored post contracts, and financial projections. One folder was labeled Post-Griffin Brand Strategy in Kaya's neat handwriting. He opened it. Inside was a complete business plan for her influencer career after divorcing him. It included a brand narrative about escaping toxic family dynamics and controlling relationships, projected follower growth to 1.5 million within 2 years, sponsorship deals with luxury brands targeting empowered single women. A book proposal titled Finding My Voice: How I Reclaimed My Life from Family Control. Partnership opportunities with divorce attorneys and therapists, positioning herself as a spokesperson for women escaping emotional abuse. Every single piece of her post-divorce life was planned, monetized, and weaponized. She was going to build a career on destroying Griffin's reputation. She was going to write a book, Griffin said, his voice shaking, about how my family abused her, about how she had to escape us, and none of it would have been true. Not one word. But she didn't get the chance, I said firmly, because we found out first, because we have evidence, because she underestimated what a mother will do to protect her son. Griffin dropped the business plan back on the desk and walked out of the room. I heard him in the bedroom, the sounds of packing becoming more aggressive, drawers slamming, closet doors banging. Marcus looked at me with something like sympathy. This is the anger phase, I mentioned. I nodded. Let him have it. He's earned it. It took another 2 hours to pack everything Griffin wanted to take immediately. Clothes, personal items, his laptop, important documents. He left most of the furniture. I don't want anything that reminds me of her, he said, but took a few items that had been his before the marriage. His drafting table, a vintage chair that had been Robert's, some books, and artwork. We were loading the last box into my car when Kaya appeared. She must have been watching the building, waiting to time her entrance for maximum drama. She was dressed in athleisure wear, expensive Lululemon that probably cost more than most people's weekly grocery budget, with her hair in a carefully messy bun and minimal makeup that somehow made her look both vulnerable and beautiful. Her phone was already in her hand. "Griffin, baby, please," she called out, her voice carrying across the parking garage. "Can we just talk about this? I know your mom has poisoned you against me, but we can work through this. We can go to counseling. We can—" "Don't," Griffin said, not even turning to look at her. "Don't call me baby. Don't pretend you care. I saw your office, Kaya. I saw the business plan. I know exactly what I was to you." Her face flickered, just for a second, the mask slipping, before she recovered. "Whatever you think you saw, you're misunderstanding. I can explain." "You called me a target," Griffin said, finally turning to face her. "In your notes from the day we met, you literally wrote target acquired. Do you want to explain that?" She glanced at me, at Marcus, calculating. I could see her trying to figure out how much we knew, what we could prove, how to spin this. Those notes they were from before I got to know you, before I fell in love with you. Everyone has thoughts at the beginning of a relationship. That doesn't mean— "You have a complete post-divorce business plan," Griffin continued, his voice getting louder, "including a book proposal about escaping our toxic family. And you were going to make money off of lying about abuse that never happened. You were going to destroy my reputation, my mother's reputation, for Instagram likes and brand deals. That was just brainstorming. Creative planning. I'm an influencer. I have to think about potential content." "You've been sleeping with Devin Ashworth for 5 months, Griffin said, and his voice finally broke. "You took trips with him. You told your friend Lexi that I was your temporary plan B. You stole $47,000 from our joint account. And you know what the worst part is? The absolute worst part? You made me think I was crazy. You made me doubt my own mother. You isolated me from everyone who actually loved me so you could drain my bank account and my trust fund and plan your exit strategy." Tears were running down Kaya's face now. Real or performed, I couldn't tell anymore. "Griffin, I made mistakes, okay? I was confused. I was scared. I didn't know how to handle the pressure of your family's expectations." "My family's expectations?" Griffin laughed, that same hollow sound from the morning. My mother contributed $30,000 to our wedding, and you wanted 3 times that. She offered support and boundaries, and you called it control. The only expectations you couldn't meet were basic human decency and fidelity. This is all her fault, Kaya said, pointing at me, her voice turning venomous. She's been trying to break us up since day one. She hired a private investigator to stalk me, to invade my privacy, to dig up anything she could use against me. That's not love, that's obsession. That's control. Griffin, can't you see she's manipulating you? She's protecting me, Griffin said quietly. Something I was too blind to realize I needed. Kaya's tears stopped as quickly as they'd started. Her face hardened into something ugly and mean. Fine. You want to believe her lies? You want to throw away 2 years of marriage over some misunderstood notes and text messages? Go ahead. But don't come crying to me when you realize what you've lost. And don't expect me to stay quiet about what this family put me through. Actually, Marcus stepped forward, you are going to stay quiet. Because if you post one single thing on social media that defames Griffin or Mrs. Lockhart, we have 47 pages of documented evidence that will go to every sponsor you've ever worked with, every brand that's ever sent you free products, and every single one of your 340,000 followers. We have the full timeline of your affair with Devin Ashworth, including hotel receipts and photographs. We have evidence of financial fraud. We have your own handwritten business plan describing how you intended to falsely claim abuse for profit. He handed her a manila envelope. This is a cease and desist letter prepared by Mrs. Lockhart's attorney. You're not to contact Griffin except through lawyers. You're not to make any public statements about this marriage or this family. You're not to access the joint bank account. It's been frozen as of this morning, and you have 72 hours to vacate this apartment. Kaya stared at the envelope like it might bite her. You can't kick me out. I live here. The apartment is in Griffin's name only, Marcus continued. You have no legal right to remain. 72 hours, Ms. Moretti. After that, your belongings will be placed in storage at your expense. You can't do this, she said, but her voice had lost its conviction. She looked at Griffin, trying one more time. Baby, please, don't let them do this. We can fix this. I love you. Griffin met her eyes. No, you don't. And I don't think you ever did. I was just a stepping stone to you. A means to an end. And the really sad thing is, if you'd actually loved me, if you'd been genuine from the start, I would have given you everything. My mother would have accepted you. We would have been a real family. But you didn't want a family. You wanted a storyline. He got into my car without another word. I followed, Marcus right behind me. As we pulled out of the parking garage, I looked in the rearview mirror. Kaya was standing there, phone in hand, and I knew she was already trying to figure out her next move. But for the first time in 2 years, she wasn't the one controlling the narrative. The drive back to Belmont was quiet. Griffin stared out the window, watching the city give way to suburbs, processing everything that had just happened. When we pulled into my driveway, he didn't move immediately. I gave her 2 years of my life, he finally said. 2 years of believing in something that was never real. You gave 2 years to learning an important lesson, I replied. About trust, about intuition, about listening to the people who really love you. That's not wasted time. That's education. Expensive education. The best lessons usually are. He looked at me then, really looked at me. How did you know? From the very beginning, how did you know she was wrong? I thought about that first dinner, about all the small signals that had added up to one big certainty. Because I know you. I know what lights you up, what makes you happy, what feeds your soul. And when you were with her, those lights started going out one by one. You stopped talking about your projects with excitement. You stopped seeing your friends. You stopped coming home. Real love makes you more yourself, not less. She was erasing you piece by piece, and a mother knows when her child is disappearing. Griffin's eyes filled with tears. I'm sorry I didn't believe you. I'm sorry I pushed you away. You have nothing to apologize for. She was very, very good at what she did. And you loved her, or at least you loved who you thought she was. There's no shame in that. What do I do now? Now you file for divorce. You protect your assets. You talk to a therapist about processing this trauma, and yes, it is trauma. You let yourself grieve the relationship you thought you had, and then, eventually, you start rebuilding. In that order? More or less. He smiled for the first time. Small and sad, but real. Can I stay here for a while? I know I'm 32 years old and probably shouldn't be living with my mother, but you can stay as long as you need, I interrupted. This is your home. It will always be your home. We sat there in the car for a few more minutes, neither of us ready to move yet. The afternoon sun was starting to slant through the trees, casting long shadows across the driveway. Somewhere in the neighborhood, a dog was barking. Life was continuing normally for everyone else, while Griffin's entire world had just been dismantled and would need to be rebuilt from scratch. But he was here. He was safe. He was home. And that was enough for now. The next 72 hours passed in a strange blur of legal paperwork and emotional landmines. Griffin moved through it all like someone underwater, signing documents his lawyer put in front of him, responding to questions in monosyllables, existing but not quite living. I'd seen him grieve before when Robert died, but this was different. This was grief mixed with betrayal, mourning twisted with humiliation. On the third day, just as the 72-hour eviction notice was expiring, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Mrs. Lockhart? A man's voice, smooth and professional. My name is Devin Ashworth. I believe we have a mutual acquaintance. I walked out to the back patio where Griffin couldn't hear. Mr. Ashworth, I'm surprised to hear from you. I imagine you are. I wanted to reach out directly rather than let this situation become more complicated than it needs to be. He paused. I received a very interesting package yesterday. Photos, text messages, hotel receipts, all very thoroughly documented. I assume you're responsible. Marcus Brennan is very good at his job. Clearly. Another pause. I'm calling to let you know that my involvement with Ms. Moretti ended the moment I received that package. I've also informed my wife of the affair, and we're in marriage counseling. It seemed better she hear it from me than discover it some other way. I hadn't expected that. That must have been difficult. Less difficult than my wife finding out from a stranger, or worse, from social media. I made a mistake, Mrs. Lockhart. A significant one. But I'm not interested in compounding that mistake by letting Ms. Moretti continue to manipulate the situation. What do you mean? She called me yesterday, multiple times, crying, saying her marriage fell apart, that she needed me, that we could finally be together now. When I told her it was over, she threatened to go public with our affair, expose me, ruin my business reputation, contact my wife. She seemed to think she had leverage. My grip tightened on the phone. And I informed her that I'd already told my wife everything, that I had copies of all the messages where she explicitly discussed using both me and your son for financial gain, and that if she made any public statements, I'd release everything, showing her calculated manipulation of both relationships. I also mentioned that attempting to extort me could result in criminal charges. How did she respond to that? She hung up. But Mrs. Lockhart, I'm calling because I think you should know. She's not going to go quietly. Women like Kaya don't accept losing. She'll find another angle, another play. She's already spinning this as victimhood on her Instagram. I pulled out my own phone with my free hand, opening Instagram. Kaya's profile showed 3 new posts from the past 2 days. The first was a photo of her face, makeup-free, eyes red from crying. When your world falls apart and the people you trusted most become your biggest betrayers, healing starts with accepting that some families are too toxic to salvage. Toxic family, chakra boundaries, chakra healing journey. The second post was longer, a carousel of text screenshots describing emotional abuse and controlling in-laws and financial manipulation, painting herself as a victim who'd tried everything to make her marriage work despite impossible circumstances. The third post, from just 2 hours ago, showed her packing boxes. Sometimes leaving is the bravest thing you can do. Starting over with nothing but my strength and my truth. To everyone who's been there, you're not alone. Domestic Abuse, Noster's survivor story, new beginnings. The comments were filled with support. Hundreds of messages from followers saying, "Stay strong, you deserve better, toxic in-laws are the worst." She was controlling the narrative, just like she'd always planned. "I see what you mean," I said to Devin. "The problem is, she's good at this. Very good. She knows exactly how to play the victim while attacking her targets." And right now, she's positioning herself as the wronged wife escaping an abusive situation. That's her brand strategy, the one your investigator found. She's implementing it even though the divorce isn't on her terms. We have evidence. We have her own documents proving it's all lies. Evidence doesn't matter in the court of public opinion, Mrs. Lockhart. What matters is the story people believe. And right now, 340,000 people believe her story. He was right. I could feel it in my bones. This wasn't over. Kaya was just pivoting, adapting, finding a new way to monetize the situation. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Because despite everything, I don't think your son deserves to have his reputation destroyed by someone like her. And because my wife made me realize something during our counseling session, men like me, we enable women like Kaya. We fall for the performance, we provide the resources, and then we're surprised when we're not the only ones they're performing for. I can't undo what I did to your son's marriage, but I can at least warn you that she's not finished. After he hung up, I stood on the patio for a long moment, watching clouds move across the afternoon sky. Griffin was inside, probably in his old bedroom, hiding from a world that felt too sharp and too bright. And somewhere in Boston, Kaya was weaponizing her victimhood, building an empire on lies about my family. I walked back inside and found Griffin exactly where I expected, sitting on his bed, laptop open, staring at Kaya's Instagram profile. She's calling us abusers, he said without looking up. She's telling 300,000 people that we're toxic, controlling, manipulative, and they're all believing her. I sat beside him, looking at the screen. The comments were overwhelming. Hundreds of people validating Kaya's narrative, sharing their own stories of toxic in-laws, offering support and advice. A few people were asking questions, pointing out inconsistencies, but they were drowned out by the supportive majority. We could release everything, Griffin said. The screenshots, the business plan, the evidence of the affair. We could show everyone what she really is. We could, I agreed. But then what? We engage in a public battle where everyone picks sides based on who they want to believe? Where your private pain becomes entertainment for millions of strangers? Where the details of your marriage get dissected by people who've never met you? So we just let her win? Let her tell these lies? We let her tell her story while we protect ours. Griffin, look at me. I waited until he turned away from the screen. Kaya needs public validation. She needs the likes, the comments, the followers. That's her oxygen. But you don't need that. You never have. Your worth isn't measured in social media engagement. It feels like everyone believes her. Everyone who matters knows the truth. Your friends, your colleagues, your family. The people who actually know you will see through her story. And the people who don't know you, their opinions don't matter. He shook his head. You don't understand. This will follow me. Every time someone Googles my name, they'll find her posts. Every date I try to go on, every professional connection I try to make, they'll all see this first. She's not just lying about me. She's creating a permanent record of lies that will define me. And that's when I realized he was right. This wasn't just about winning a divorce settlement or protecting our assets. This was about Griffin's entire future. Kaya wasn't just taking his money or his time. She was trying to take his identity, his reputation, his ability to move forward with his life. Then we don't just protect ourselves, I said slowly, the plan forming as I spoke. We proactively tell the truth, not in a social media war, but through the right channels. Your friends, your professional network, the people who actually influence your life. We document everything, we create a timeline, and we make sure that anyone who matters has access to the real story. That sounds like a lot of work for something that shouldn't be necessary. It is a lot of work. It's exhausting and unfair, and you shouldn't have to do it. But Griffin, this is the price of protecting yourself from someone who doesn't care about truth. We can either complain about how unfair it is, or we can do the work. He was quiet for a long moment, staring at Kaya's smiling face on the Instagram post. Then he closed the laptop. Okay, he said. Tell me what we need to do. First, we talk to your lawyer about a comprehensive divorce strategy that includes reputation protection. Second, we reach out to your close friends and colleagues with a brief, factual explanation of the situation before they hear Kaya's version. Third, we document everything, every lie she posts, every claim she makes. So if this ever goes to court, we have proof of her pattern of deception. And fourth, you start rebuilding your life anyway. You go to therapy, you reconnect with friends, you focus on your work, you show everyone through your actions that you're not the person she's describing. Because the best response to lies isn't more words, it's living a life that makes the lies obviously false. Griffin nodded slowly. Dad would say something like that. He'd say, let your characters speak louder than their accusations. He would. And he'd be proud of you for not giving up, even when it feels impossible. I don't feel proud of myself. I feel like an idiot who got played. You're not an idiot. You're someone who loved honestly and got manipulated by someone who loves strategically. There's a difference. One speaks to your weakness, the other speaks to hers. He leaned against me, the way he used to when he was small and the world felt too big. This is going to be hard, isn't it? Yes, I said honestly. It's going to be very hard, but you're not doing it alone. Outside, the afternoon was shifting toward evening. Tomorrow, we'd start the work of fighting back against Kaya's narrative. Tomorrow, we'd begin the long process of legal divorce and reputation repair. Tomorrow, Griffin would take the first steps toward reclaiming his life. But tonight, we sat together in his childhood bedroom, mother and son, and simply existed in the truth that Kaya couldn't touch. That real love doesn't manipulate, doesn't calculate, doesn't plan exit strategies while pretending forever. Real love just shows up, holds on, and refuses to let go. The next 2 weeks were a masterclass in strategic warfare. Griffin's attorney, Patricia Chen, a sharp woman in her 50s who specialized in high-conflict divorces, laid out a comprehensive plan that went beyond simple asset division. We weren't just ending a marriage. We were protecting Griffin's entire future from someone who'd weaponized victimhood as a business model. She's going to escalate, Patricia warned us during our first strategy meeting. Right now, she's posting vague victim content. But when the divorce papers are served, when she realizes she's not getting what she wants financially, she'll get specific. She'll name names, make direct accusations. We need to be prepared for that. Can't we stop her legally? Griffin asked. Isn't there something about defamation or slander? Defamation requires proving the statements are false and caused measurable damage. Social media makes that incredibly difficult. She'll couch everything in my truth and my experience, which gives her legal protection. By the time you could prove defamation and get a court order, the damage would already be done. So what do? Patricia smiled grimly. We build a fortress before she attacks. We create a documented timeline of facts that anyone can verify. We reach out to key people in your life with a clear, unemotional explanation of the situation. We make sure that when she starts making claims, there's already a counter-narrative in place from credible sources. That's exactly what we did. Griffin drafted a letter, reviewed by Patricia to ensure it was legally sound, explaining the situation to his partners at the architecture firm, his close friends, and key professional contacts. It was brief, factual, and included no emotional attacks on Kaya. I'm writing to inform you that my wife Kaya and I are divorcing due to irreconcilable differences, including documented financial impropriety and infidelity. During this process, you may see social media posts painting a different picture of our marriage and my family. I want you to know the facts before you hear anyone's interpretation of them. I've made mistakes in this marriage, including not recognizing warning signs earlier. I'm focused now on moving forward professionally and personally. I appreciate your friendship and support during this difficult time. The responses were immediate and overwhelmingly supportive. Friends Griffin hadn't spoken to in months, isolated by Kaya's systematic cutting, reached out with shock and solidarity. His firm's senior partner called personally to assure him his position was secure and offered to provide legal support if needed. Even acquaintances who'd only met Kaya at social events admitted they'd found her performative or calculating, but hadn't wanted to say anything. I feel like an idiot, Griffin said, after reading through the responses. Half of my friends saw through her, and I didn't. They weren't in love with her, I pointed out. They could afford to be objective. But Kaya's response to being served with divorce papers was worse than even Patricia predicted. It started with an Instagram live video that got over 50,000 viewers in real time. Kaya, makeup-free and crying, sat in what appeared to be a sparse, empty apartment. though I suspected it was carefully staged, and told her story. "I need to be honest with all of you because you've supported me through so much," she began, her voice trembling. "My marriage is over. And I need to tell you why, because staying silent makes me complicit in a system that protects abusers." My stomach dropped. Griffin, sitting beside me watching on his laptop, went rigid. For 2 years, I tried to be the perfect wife to a man whose mother refused to accept me. Nothing I did was good enough. Every decision I made was questioned. Every dollar I spent was scrutinized. I couldn't have friends over without permission. I couldn't make career decisions without approval. And when I finally found the courage to set boundaries, I was punished. She took a shaky breath, wiping tears. The financial abuse started small. His mother controlled his trust fund, and she used that control to manipulate both of us. When I tried to start my business, my dream of building something independent, she called it wasteful spending and tried to cut off our access to funds. When I succeeded anyway, when brands started wanting to work with me, she felt threatened. "This is insane," Griffin whispered. "None of this is true. None of it." Kaya continued, gaining momentum. 3 weeks ago, I set a firm boundary. I told my mother-in-law that I needed space, that her constant interference was damaging my mental health and my marriage. And you know what happened? She hired a private investigator to stalk me, to dig through my private messages, my personal accounts, my entire life looking for ammunition to use against me. The comments on the live video were exploding with support. "This is so brave. You deserve better. Toxic males are the worst. Sue them for invasion of privacy." When I confronted her about the stalking, she threatened me, said she had evidence that would destroy me. Evidence that was obtained illegally, by the way. Evidence that was taken out of context to create a false narrative. And my husband, the man I loved, the man I built a life with, he believed her over me. He chose his mother's lies over his wife's truth. Griffin stood up abruptly, pacing. "I can't watch this. I can't sit here and watch her rewrite everything." But I couldn't look away, because Kaya wasn't done. "I found out today that I'm being served with divorce papers. After 2 years of trying to make this work, after tolerating abuse and manipulation and control, I'm being discarded. And you want to know the worst part?" Her voice broke convincingly. "I'm being accused of stealing money from my own marriage. Money I earned through my brand partnerships, through my work, is being called theft because I put it in a personal account. Because apparently, in their world, wives don't get to have financial independence." "That's a lie," I said aloud. "The $47,000 came from their joint account, funded entirely by Griffin's salary. She didn't earn any of it. They're trying to destroy me," Kaya continued. "They have lawyers, private investigators, unlimited resources, and I have nothing but my truth and your support. So I'm asking you, if you believe survivors, if you believe women, if you've ever dealt with toxic family dynamics, please share my story. Please don't let them silence me. Please don't let powerful people with money crush someone who's just trying to survive." The video ended. Within 30 minutes, it had been viewed 200,000 times. Within an hour, it was being shared on Twitter, TikTok, and Facebook. By evening, it had gone viral. My phone started ringing. Friends asking if I'd seen it. Professional contacts inquiring delicately about the situation. Even a reporter from a local news blog asking for comment on the allegations of elder abuse and financial manipulation. "This is a nightmare," Griffin said, staring at his own phone as notifications poured in. "She's making you look like some kind of monster. She's making me look like a mama's boy who can't think for himself. And 500,000 people believe her." Patricia called within the hour. "Don't respond publicly. Don't comment. Don't engage. Anything you say right now will be used against you." "So, we just let her lie?" Griffin's voice was rising toward panic. "We let her tell the entire internet that my mother is an abusive stalker? We let her make claims that we can disprove in court? Griffin, this is actually good for your case. She's making specific accusations now, financial abuse, stalking, manipulation. Those are disprovable. We have bank records, legal documentation of the investigation, communication logs. Let her build her public narrative. We'll dismantle it in divorce proceedings where facts actually matter." But the court of public opinion moved faster than any legal proceeding. By the next morning, Kaya's story had been picked up by several influencer news accounts and women's advocacy blogs. The narrative was clear. Young woman escapes controlling, wealthy family who used their resources to systematically destroy her when she tried to establish independence. Some posts included our names. Griffin's architecture firm was tagged. Someone found my business LinkedIn and left reviews calling me a family destroyer and toxic mother-in-law. The story had taken on a life of its own, growing details and accusations with each retelling. "People are showing up at my office," Griffin said on the third day after the video. "Not many, but enough. Someone left a note on my car calling me an abuser. My assistant said a woman came in asking if it was true I'd isolated my wife from her family and controlled her finances. Did you call Patricia? She says it's harassment, but hard to prosecute. She's documenting everything in case we need restraining orders." I felt helpless in a way I hadn't since Robert died. I'd built a successful career on managing narratives, on helping brands tell their stories effectively. But this was different. This wasn't a corporate rebranding where we controlled the message. This was guerrilla warfare where truth was irrelevant and emotion was everything. Then Marcus called with news that changed everything. "I've been monitoring Kaya's activity since the divorce was filed," he said. "She's been sloppy. Probably because she's emotional and reactive right now instead of strategic, and she made a mistake." "What kind of mistake?" "Remember Devin Ashworth? He's not the only wealthy man she's been cultivating. I found evidence of at least 3 others, all contacted in the past 2 weeks, right after the divorce papers were served. She's trying to line up her next target. That's gross, but not illegal." "No, but this is..." "She's been DMing some of her followers offering to sell exclusive content about the divorce. Private details, behind-the-scenes information, even offering to name names for the right price. That crosses a line into potential extortion territory." "Can you prove it?" "I have screenshots. She was using a secondary Instagram account she thought was anonymous, but the IP address traces back to her phone. She's literally trying to monetize false abuse allegations." I called Patricia immediately. Within an hour, we had an emergency meeting scheduled. "This is exactly what we needed," Patricia said, reviewing Marcus's evidence. "She's not just making false claims. She's attempting to profit from them. That gives us grounds for a defamation suit, possible extortion charges, and most importantly, it completely undermines her credibility. But if we release this now, publicly, won't it look like we're attacking a victim?" I asked. "We're not releasing it publicly. We're taking it to court. We're filing for an emergency injunction to stop her from making further public statements about the divorce pending the outcome of the case. And we're including this evidence to show she's not a victim telling her truth. She's a con artist, monetizing lies. Will it work? It'll take time. But yes, I think it will. Especially because she's been so public and so specific in her accusations. She's given us plenty to work with." The emergency hearing was scheduled for 5 days later. In the meantime, Kaya's viral moment continued to grow. She'd gained another 100,000 followers. Brands were reaching out offering partnerships for survivor content. She was doing podcast interviews about escaping toxic families and financial abuse in marriages. She was building exactly the empire she'd planned, just with a different origin story than she'd originally written. The night before the hearing, Griffin came into my office where I was reviewing documents. He looked exhausted, like he hadn't slept in days. "What if this doesn't work?" he asked. "What if the judge believes her? What if we lose? Then we appeal. We keep fighting. We don't give up." "I'm tired, Mom. I'm so tired of fighting. Part of me wants to just disappear, change my name, move somewhere nobody knows this story." I understood the impulse. I'd had similar thoughts myself over the past weeks, fantasies of packing up and moving to a small town where Instagram didn't exist and reputations weren't built on lies. "But you won't," I said gently, "because disappearing would mean she wins. It would mean she gets to tell your story instead of you living your truth. And you're stronger than that." "Am I?" "Because I don't feel strong. I feel like I'm drowning. You're still swimming. That's the definition of strong." The hearing itself was anticlimactic in its efficiency. Patricia presented evidence, bank records showing the source of the disputed funds, legal documentation of Marcus's investigation proving it was conducted lawfully, communication logs showing Kaya's systematic isolation of Griffin from family and friends, and most damning, screenshots of her attempting to sell exclusive divorce content for profit. Kaya's attorney tried to argue that she was simply trying to make a living after being cut off financially, that the private messages were taken out of context, that she had every right to tell her story. But the judge wasn't buying it. "Ms. Moretti," Judge Richardson said, looking over her glasses, "your social media posts make specific claims of financial abuse, illegal stalking, and elder abuse. These are serious accusations. Yet the evidence shows that the investigation into your activities was conducted legally, that the funds in question came from your husband's income, not yours, and that you are actively attempting to profit from these allegations while the divorce is pending. Your Honor, you're trying to manipulate public opinion to influence the outcome of your divorce proceedings while simultaneously monetizing a false narrative. I'm granting the plaintiff's request for an injunction. You are prohibited from making any further public statements about this divorce, about Mr. Lockhart, or about Mrs. Lockhart until the divorce is finalized. Any violation will result in contempt charges. Do you understand?" Kaya's face went from performance-ready sadness to genuine shock. "You're telling me I can't talk about my own life? I'm telling you that you can't defame people with false accusations while trying to sell those accusations for profit. Once the divorce is finalized and assets are divided according to the law, you're free to tell whatever story you choose. But until then, your social media presence as it relates to this marriage is suspended." We walked out of that courtroom into autumn sunshine that felt like a spotlight. Griffin stopped on the courthouse steps, tilting his face toward the sky. "Is it over?" he asked. "Not over," Patricia corrected. "But we won this round. She can't keep building her victim narrative publicly, which means the viral moment dies down. Eventually, people move on to the next story. And in the meantime, we proceed with the actual divorce based on facts instead of social media performance." That night, Kaya posted one final Instagram story before going silent. "Sometimes the system protects the powerful instead of the truth. But my truth doesn't need permission to exist. More to come when I'm legally allowed to speak." Then her account went private. Griffin and I sat in my kitchen, the same kitchen where this had all started 3 weeks ago, drinking tea and processing what felt like a temporary victory. "She'll come back," Griffin said. "Once the divorce is final, once the court order expires, she'll tell her version with no restriction. Probably. But by then, you'll have moved forward. You'll have your life back. And whatever she says won't matter as much because you won't be defined by it anymore." "You really believe that?" "I have to. Because the alternative is letting someone like her have permanent power over us, and I refuse to give her that." Griffin nodded slowly, then reached across the table and took my hand. "Thank you. For fighting for me. For not giving up, even when I made it nearly impossible. That's what mothers do," I said simply. "We fight, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." Outside, the neighborhood was settling into evening. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. More legal proceedings, more paperwork, more steps in the long process of untangling Griffin's life from Kaya's web. But tonight, we'd won something important. Not just a court order, but proof that truth could still matter even in a world built on performed narratives. It wasn't the ending, but it was a beginning. The divorce was finalized on a gray morning in March, 4 months after that confrontation in my living room. Griffin and I sat in Patricia's office while she reviewed the final settlement. Kaya hadn't shown up for the proceedings. Her attorney appeared on her behalf, signed the papers, and left without comment. "She gets nothing beyond what she came into the marriage with," Patricia explained, sliding the documents across her desk. "The prenuptial agreement held up perfectly. The $47,000 she transferred to her personal account has been returned with interest. Griffin retains all assets accumulated during the marriage, including his trust fund, retirement accounts, and personal property. She has 72 hours to remove any remaining items from the apartment." "What about the NDA?" I asked. "She refused to sign it, which means once the court order expires next month, she's free to say whatever she wants publicly." Griffin had been quiet throughout the meeting, staring at the papers that officially ended his marriage. "So she'll come back. Tell her story. Build her brand on calling me an abuser." "Possibly," Patricia acknowledged. "But Griffin, here's the thing. 4 months have passed. The viral moment is over. Her follower count has actually dropped by 60,000 since the injunction. People have short attention spans. Unless she has something new and dramatic to add, the story is stale news. And if she does add something new, then we deal with it. But right now you're legally free. Your assets are protected. Your reputation with people who actually matter, your firm, your friends, your family, is intact. That's what counts. We left Patricia's office and drove back to Belmont in silence. Griffin had been living with me for 4 months now, slowly rebuilding pieces of himself that Kaya had systematically dismantled. He'd started therapy twice a week. He'd reconnected with friends. He'd thrown himself into work, designing a community center in Roxbury that was already generating industry recognition. But I could still see the wounds, the way he'd flinch when his phone buzzed with notifications, the way he'd go quiet sometimes, lost in thoughts he didn't want to share, the way he avoided any conversation about dating or relationships, as if that part of him had been permanently damaged. "I want to show you something," I said when we got home. I led him to my office and pulled out a folder I'd been keeping. Marcus continued monitoring Kaya's activity even after the injunction, just in case we needed more evidence. "Mom, it's over. I don't want to—" "Just look." Inside were printouts of Kaya's private Instagram account, the one she'd thought was anonymous. Over the past 4 months, she'd been posting regularly to her small group of dedicated followers. But the content had shifted. She wasn't posting about abuse or toxic families anymore. She was posting about her comeback journey. Photos from expensive restaurants with new men, different faces every few weeks. Screenshots of DMs from brands wanting to work with her when the legal stuff is resolved. Plans for a podcast called Surviving Family Trauma that would launch once I'm free to speak my truth. But most telling were the posts from just last week. Kaya, at a charity gala in New York, dressed in a gown that cost more than most people's monthly salary. On the arm of a man Marcus had identified as Trevor Whitmore, tech investor, net worth estimated at $80 million, recently divorced. The caption read, "New chapter, new energy, new possibilities. Sometimes the universe removes people from your life to make room for your actual destiny. Grateful for the lessons. Yas are blessed, yas new beginnings. Yas know your worth." Griffin stared at the photos. She's already moved on. It's been 4 months, and she's already found her next target. Does that bother you? He thought about it. No. Actually, it's kind of a relief. She wasn't destroyed by losing me. She wasn't even really affected. Which means everything she said about loving me, about fighting for our marriage, it was all performance, just like everything else. Does knowing that help? It helps me stop wondering if I could have done something differently. She didn't want me to be different. She wanted what I represented, the money, the family name, the social status. When that became unavailable, she moved on to the next opportunity. It was never personal. That's actually very insightful. Your therapist would be proud. He smiled. A real smile. The first one I'd seen in weeks. Dr. Morrison says I'm making progress. She thinks I'm ready to start reintegrating into social situations with potential romantic undertones. That's a very clinical way of saying dating. I'm not ready for that, not even close, but maybe someday. Over the next few weeks, spring arrived with its usual New England drama. Gray skies giving way to sudden sunshine, trees exploding with green almost overnight. Griffin started staying out later with friends, coming home with stories about dinners and concerts and normal things that people in their 30s did. The apartment in Back Bay had been sublet to a young couple from his firm. He'd moved most of his belongings into the guest house behind my property, a compromise between living with his mother and finding his own place. "It's temporary," he kept saying. "Just until I figure out what I want. Stay as long as you need," I'd reply. And I meant it. Having him close felt like breathing properly again after months of holding my breath. One evening in late April, Marcus called with his final report. Kaya Moretti married Trevor Whitmore last weekend in a private ceremony in Napa Valley. Small wedding, no social media posts yet, but I have confirmation from 2 sources. She signed a prenup this time. Apparently Whitmore's attorney was very thorough. That was fast. She's efficient, I'll give her that. Found a richer target, locked it down before he could do due diligence. Though apparently Whitmore's ex-wife tried to warn him, and he didn't listen. Some men never learn. Is she going to be a problem? For Griffin or for me? I don't think so. The court order expires next week, but honestly, she's moved on. Her entire Instagram presence has shifted to tech wife content. She's already rebranded herself as a wellness entrepreneur with tech industry connections. The divorce drama doesn't fit her new narrative. After hanging up, I walked out to the guest house where Griffin was working on design sketches for his community center project. I told him about Kaya's remarriage. He set down his pencil and stared at his drawings. 8 months. Our divorce has been final for 1 month and she's already remarried. That's got to be some kind of record. Does it hurt? It should, right? I should feel something. Anger, betrayal, relief. But mostly I just feel tired. Like I ran a marathon and finally get to stop running. That's probably healthy. Dr. Morrison says the same thing. She says grief has its own timeline and I shouldn't force feelings I don't have. He looked up at me. Are you disappointed in me? For not being angrier? Disappointed? Griffin, no. I'm proud of you. You survived something that could have destroyed you. You're rebuilding your life with intention instead of bitterness. That takes incredible strength. I learned it from watching you. After Dad died, you could have fallen apart. But you built your business. You kept going. You stayed strong for me. Even when I didn't deserve it. You always deserved it. You just couldn't see it for a while. We sat in comfortable silence, the kind that only comes from people who've been through war together and survived. Outside, I could hear the neighborhood coming alive with evening activity. Children playing, someone mowing their lawn, the distant sound of a dog barking. I'm thinking about buying a condo, Griffin said eventually. Nothing big, just a place that's mine. Fresh start, you know? I think that's a wonderful idea. But I'll still come for Sunday dinners, if that's okay. Griffin, Sunday dinners will always be here for you. Always. 3 months later, I stood in Griffin's new condo in Cambridge, a bright, modern space with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of the Charles River. He'd furnished it simply but elegantly, with pieces that reflected his taste rather than someone else's vision of what his life should look like. On the walls were his own architectural sketches, photos of him with friends, a picture of Robert from Griffin's college graduation. What do you think? He asked, clearly nervous about my opinion. I think it's perfect. I think it's very you. Kaya would have hated it. Not Instagrammable enough. Good thing her opinion doesn't matter anymore. He laughed. You know what? You're right. It really doesn't. Later that evening, as I was leaving, Griffin hugged me at the door. Thank you for not giving up on me. Even when I pushed you away. Even when it would have been easier to just let me make my own mistakes. Mothers don't give up, I said. It's not in our programming. I know. And I'm starting to understand what a gift that is. I drove home through the Cambridge streets, past Harvard Square with its late summer crowds, onto the highway toward Belmont. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that Robert would have stopped to photograph. I missed him every day, but tonight the missing felt softer, less sharp. He would have been proud of Griffin, proud of how our son had survived betrayal and come out stronger, proud of how he'd learned to trust his own judgment again. Proud of the man he was becoming. And maybe, just maybe, Robert would have been proud of me too, for fighting when it mattered, for protecting our son even when it meant being the villain in someone else's story, for knowing that sometimes love looks like saying the hard truths that no one wants to hear. The house was quiet when I arrived, but it was a comfortable quiet. Not the silence of loneliness, but the peace of knowing that the people you love are safe. Even if they're not physically present. Griffin was building his new life. I was continuing mine. And somewhere out in the world, Kaya was playing her games with a new victim who would eventually, inevitably, discover the truth behind her performance. But that wasn't my story to tell anymore. My story was this. I had my son back. We had survived. And sometimes, that's the only victory that matters. I made tea, sat in Robert's study, and looked at our wedding photo on the shelf. We did okay, I told his image. Our boy is going to be fine. And for the first time in almost a year, I believed it completely.